This video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Hello, my beautiful doves. I feel like I've relaxed a lot as a person since when I first started making YouTube videos. If you've been following me for a while, like back in those days, back in the early days, I remember feeling so enraged by historical inaccuracy, like stupid historical inaccuracy in movies and TV shows. And honestly, even in real life too, like if someone said something historically inaccurate and I knew that it was historically inaccurate, I feel like my head would just like make this 180-degree exorcist turn. There would be this crazed look in my eye, and then I would proceed to be the most annoying person in the room. I honestly think that nitpicking was a product of not having anything else going on with my life. Let's be real. I also hadn't experienced improv-related ego death yet, et cetera, so not to make excuses for myself, but there were circumstances. I was a young person at the time. Of course, it's fun and it's fine to talk about historical inaccuracy, of course, complain about it even, but at the end of the day, life goes on, and for the most part, a person not in fashion getting a fact wrong about the hoop skirt is not going to kill me or society at large. In saying that, there is one historical inaccuracy that to this day has the power to summon demons of my yesteryears. It's just like so blatantly wrong and easily disproved, yet so circulated and readily accepted as fact that it just like makes me seethe to this day whenever I hear it. And it's this: Marilyn Monroe was a size 16, and so she was actually plus sized. Vanity sizing aside, just looking at old photos of her, we all know it's not true. And recently, I saw another version of the statement in tweet form with someone posting a, quote, thread of how Marilyn Monroe actually looked in real life, and then 2 pictures of her, and it got over 422,000 likes. It's not even an actual thread because the person only posted 2 more photos of her, both close-ups of her face, but I'm not the Twitter police. If I was, Joe Rogan would have been deplatformed by now. Okay, so my problem with this photo set, this chosen photo set, is that the specific photos were photos of Marilyn Monroe when she was pregnant. And while the caption is still true, like this is how she looked in real life during a certain time in her life, when you don't follow up with any other photos of her body, especially, it makes the statement that Marilyn Monroe had this particular physicality all her life, and the small waisted version we know of her is actually inaccurate. It's AI.
Here we go again.
I'm not leaping to conclusions, I swear, because when I looked at the replies, many of them were commenting on her physique in these photos. One person said, Monroe was a size 16. Women were voluptuous at that time, not skinny sticks with fake boobs and butts. Men liked them with meat on their bones. Classic Twitter. Another user said, Marilyn had that vintage faux pas and still cleared. Real woman. Look, it's irritating to me, not because I'm like a medieval knight who needs to protect my skinny legend maiden's honor, but because it's both led to and been a symptom of backwards body positivity culture. I get that when people say Marilyn Monroe is a size 16, it's supposed to highlight the arbitrariness around what's considered the ideal body. Like, if you're a curvy woman today, living in the Ozempic era, you'd actually be a sex symbol in the 1950s. These are not entirely wrong sentiments, and yet I also feel like when people try to entrap Marilyn Monroe in this body positivity narrative, it actually ends up reinforcing a lot of harmful ideas within the sizing industrial complex. In the sense that we're still talking about size and aligning with thinness overall. Walk with me here. In our popular imagination, Marilyn Monroe is a thin, curvy woman. So when we hear the news that Marilyn Monroe wore a size 16, it might allow more of us to feel like we look like Marilyn Monroe. It gives permission to align with her thinness, with her sexiness, and all the perks that come with that. In reality, very few of us look like Marilyn Monroe. Kim Kardashian actually miscalculated her own size difference from Marilyn and had to lose 16 pounds to fit in her dress for the Met Gala in 2022. Kim admitted to Vogue at the time, I always thought she was extremely curvy. I imagined I might be smaller in some places where she was bigger and bigger in places where she was smaller. So when it didn't fit me, I wanted to cry because it can't be altered at all. But rather than talking about Marilyn Monroe all day, which I've already done before, so I'm not above that or anything, I want to get to the root of the problem and explore everything wrong with the sizing industry today. Why we have so many misconceptions, why people feel so tethered to the number on their clothes, and what I think the industry or we should do about it.
The dress fits the occasion.
It's you who doesn't fit.
How's everything fitting for you?
The dress is a little...
Is it too tight? I saw you grabbed a 6.
I usually am a 6. Freaking bitch. Why don't we just go like the next size up?
Maybe, but let's just think more critically. What's your zodiac sign?
Aquarius.
What's your mother's maiden name?
Monsanto.
Are you on any medications?
Recreational Accutane.
Do you have a good relationship with your father?
I don't think that's relevant.
So that's a no. What's your favorite color?
Green.
Carrie, Miranda, Charlotte, Samantha, which one are you?
Miranda in the morning, Samantha at night.
Have you ever seen The Godfather?
No. Why does everyone ask that?
Do you ever feel afraid?
Yes.
Okay, according to our size chart, you should actually be a size 6.
But it doesn't fit.
Well, you'll just have to figure it out then.
Wait, did you hack my bank account?
If you've been looking for a way to build your own website, Squarespace is a fantastic platform that offers tons of customization options and pre-made templates. One of my favorite features is the number of font options, actually, because I like to keep my website simple, so I really appreciate all the specific details that you can tailor. You can easily sell custom merch and create a passive income stream that engages your audience and scales your brand. Design your products, and production, inventory, and shipping are handled just for you, saving you time, money, and effort. Squarespace also offers powerful blogging tools to share stories, photos, videos, and updates. You can categorize, share, and schedule your posts very conveniently, so you can keep your audience engaged and updated as easily as possible. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MinaLe to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain.
A little more than 100 years ago, the whole idea of going into a store and buying a ready-made dress off a rack would have been inconceivable.
So, how did clothing sizes become the bane of our existence? Before the ready-made or ready-to-wear market, women's clothing was historically sized through a made-to-measure process. If you were a woman of means, you would order your dress from a dressmaker and they would make it to your individual bodily measurements. Or if you didn't have as much money, you could purchase fabric and make your own dress at home. We saw the beginnings of a standardized ready-made market starting in the 18th century. During this time, manufacturers started to produce some standard sizes of military uniforms for men. For example, between 1769 and 1784, Richard Lowe, a sole supplier to the Marines, delivered 127,245 garments. But due to the complexity of women's fashions, ready-made wouldn't become a popular alternative to made-to-measure until the early 20th century, when women's styles became looser and easier to pattern. The made-to-measure model became gradually displaced over time thanks to the rise of department stores and mail-order catalogs. Mail-order catalogs were catalogs with products that you could order through mail, hence the name, and these were used by the growing number of women living in remote rural areas who didn't have easy access to a fabric shop or dressmaker or department store. However, the problem with the ready-made model was that there was no universal size chart, so sizes varied depending on the manufacturer. And boy, did they take creative liberties with making these size charts. For example, there are size charts from the 30s that label sizes as extra small woman, woman, short outsized, outsized, and extra outsized. This might be my least favorite size chart I've seen in the research. Additionally, manufacturers introduced half sizes for shorter women with fuller figures, also called stout sizes. While some stoutwear designers, I'm sure, were well-intentioned, they were mostly designing clothes with the purpose of making their customers appear more slender and hiding their natural bodies as much as possible, thus still upholding slender beauty ideals. There's actually an interesting 1924 style guide called Dress and Look Slender, written by a woman named Jane Warren Wells. Much of Wells's book rests on the notion that stoutwear, which was supposed to slenderize the body, was actually incredibly unflattering. Like the clothing of today, she found the clothing available did not address the individual person's physique, and that the manufacturer's solution to slenderize the body was just to drape yards of dull-colored fabric all over it. Needless to say, standardized sizing was far from a perfect system. A 1939 Time article reports that U.S. manufacturers and the Mail Order Association of America, the MOAA, were losing $10 million on returns because of poor fit. As a result, the government stepped in to bail out manufacturers and commissioned the O'Brien and Shelton study. This study measured 14,698 women at 59 points on their bodies with the aim of creating a nomenclature that didn't reveal or reference a woman's weight. Of course, it's unsurprising for the time period that only young, white, able-bodied women were measured. There's actually a table in the study detailing the elimination of some of the participants, including, quote, woman non-white, age of woman unknown, and woman deformed. Some scholars have also suggested that because the survey offered a participation stipend, the data mostly consisted of women from low socioeconomic backgrounds who had smaller proportions caused by malnourishment coming out of the Great Depression. This survey was also published only as a recommendation. It didn't set a government standard. And it actually wasn't until 1958 that the MOAA encouraged the government to actually use the data. But scholar Lynn Burati explains that the study actually created too many sizes for manufacturers, 27 sizes in total. Another hiccup was that this data was now almost 20 years old and was therefore outdated and didn't represent the female bodies of the present day. The organization required a data revision. As a result, the National Bureau of Standards reanalyzed the data, but they didn't actually conduct a new study. Instead, they just added more data to the existing data. Some of the new data consisted of measurements from women who had served in the Air Force during World War II, arguably the most fit women in the country. So there was clearly a skew. And on top of that, the system was based on hourglass figure proportions. In the end, the system used numbers from 8 to 38 combined with a T, R, or S for height and a plus or minus for hip size. But just because we had a standardized system now didn't mean that things fit any better, especially considering the busted way they captured the data in the first place. The universal standard also emphasized a seemingly more objective regulation that women could now compare their bodies to. It also didn't help that as ready-made apparel became more of a norm, that women who didn't have the means or didn't know how to alter their clothes were forced to just accept that their clothes may never fit them perfectly. And thus the narrative, clothes are made to fit you, became you have to fit into your clothes. As historian Alana Staiti writes, anthropometric practices, standardization efforts, and the demand for quick turnarounds in mass-produced fashion perpetuated skewed understandings of the relationship between real and ideal bodies, compelling women to consider their bodies as plastic forms, squeezed into size designations based on normal curves and molded by forces of production that lay out of their control. The system was entirely withdrawn in 1983 due to dissatisfaction from manufacturers and customers, but it hasn't gotten any better, clearly. For example, we've seen vanity sizing growing in popularity over the last few decades, which has been very confusing. Vanity sizing refers to the inflation of sizes over time. Eliana Doctorman actually aptly calls the phenomenon insanity sizing in her article on the topic for Time magazine. Vanity sizing is easiest to explain with an example. So a size 14 in Sears' 1937 catalog is now equivalent to a size 8 in 1967, which is now a size 0 in 2011. Part of this inflation, depending on how long this company has been around for, is related to changes in the sizing standard over time on an industry level, like with the O'Brien and Shelton study. Another part of it is also the desire for individual companies to make their shoppers feel skinnier, which has historically translated into profits. Wanju Iris Franz conducted a study that found that if customers try on a garment before purchasing, vanity sizing benefits a company because customers might be more likely to purchase a smaller size. Although another interesting finding from the study is in the case that a customer does not try on the garment. In this case, vanity sizing actually works against the company because of the return fee. So I actually wonder if the prevalence of online shopping these days will put a total stop on vanity sizing. There's also alpha sizing or letter sizing like S, M, and L, which grew in popularity in the US starting from the 90s. The alpha size range is considerably smaller, usually only 5 sizes if we're lucky. So no surprise, it's cheaper to produce clothes with this size range. As companies squeeze for more profits, the clothes become more general and start to fit worse and worse. A study on mass customization and 3D body scanning sums up the problems for consumers today. Research has shown that there are significant shape differences among females that complicates the industry's ability to consistently fit all women across all styles. In addition, the growing concern about sustainability makes it important that manufacturers create products that will meet the needs of consumers rather than remain in stock and ultimately discarded when they don't sell. And yet, despite this, it seems like clothing companies are still flopping on the sizing. So the question remains, why is no one doing anything? Time and time again, the argument is usually that it's too costly to make more inclusive sizes. Brand executives have argued that to have a better range, there's upward costs of producing it, including fabric, a new fit model, labor costs as pieces take longer, and reworking patterns for garments over a size 12 to 16. And then they claim that the lines never sell in the way they expect, so it's not worth the investment. So let's address the first complaint. Some companies have actually worked around the raised costs of having an extended line by putting those costs onto the customer, aka a fat tax. A fat tax is a colloquial term referring to the upcharge in price between items made for those of larger sizes compared to those of smaller sizes. Vogue Business reported in 2019 that about 15% of the brands sold on 11 Honoré, a plus-size designer and contemporary online retailer, charged a higher wholesale price for bigger sizes. However, advocates against the fat tax point out that this tax only exists because brands base their margins on the smallest size. In an interview with Glamour, designer Becca McCharran-Tran explains, yes, it takes more fabric to make a larger garment versus a smaller one, which could be why some people want to put that back onto the customer. But that doesn't seem like the right way to do things. If I were a designer working with leather or an expensive fabric, I would alter the margin to reflect the most expensive version. It's offensive to charge it back to the customer. What she means is this, and we will be doing a little bit of math. Sorry. Say you're a shirt designer. You make really cool shirts. It costs $20 to make a size small, $25 to make a size medium, and $30 to make a size large. You decide to sell your shirts to Nordstrom for $30. Your profit on the size small is $10, whereas your profit on the size large is $0, unless you charge more for the large size shirts. But now some of your customers will have to pay a fat tax. However, if instead you decide to sell your shirts for $35, now you make $15 if you sell a small and $5 if you sell a large. And overall, this will balance out better for you. It's obviously more complicated than that, but the sentiment stays. It is possible to renegotiate costs to have more inclusive sizes. And yes, generally having more sizes will increase the initial costs, but negative attitudes towards those additional costs more often than not stem from an anti-fat bias that never saw a wide size range as necessary to begin with. As Good American co-founder Emma Greed argues, is it fair to charge the size 18 more because you only just started thinking about it? She explains that these brands are punishing larger clients for their oversight. Scholar Lynn Burati also notes that companies that make tall or petite lines don't charge more or less, even though both use different amounts of fabric. And Old Navy, which had a fat tax controversy some years ago, has never charged more for men's sizing. What we see through these examples is that there is anti-fat bias baked into the design process, especially for women's wear. There's a great Guardian article that looked at retailers in the UK, and in it, they were talking about how general practice is when you're designing clothes, use a fit model who acts essentially as a live mannequin. You then grade clothing patterns up and down based on this fit model. Fit models are chosen based on preference, so there's no industry standard. Shingo Tsukamoto, president of sizing technology specialist Makeup, explains, brands decide on their target market and size products accordingly to what will make customers happy. This also explains why a size 8 at one store might be totally different from a size 8 at another store, because fit models, like everyone else, can have different proportions. Writer of the article, Leah Harper, notes that in her personal wardrobe, she has a COS dress labeled XS, a similar Doan dress labeled M, and a Topshop dress that's loose on her but labeled a 6. This also means that brands have much more control over their size preferences than they may claim. Simeon Gill, senior lecturer in fashion technology at the University of Manchester, told Harper, I once worked with a company where the female fit model was 21 and athletic, and the male fit model was 42 and going to seed. So if a father and daughter had wanted to shop there, great. But a mother and son would have had an issue. Other systemic biases can come up later down the production process, all the way to the store. Take the bridal industry, for instance. Maddie Evans conducted participant observation on a bridal boutique over the course of 8 months back in 2016. And during that time, she helped brides pick out dresses, answered phone calls, interacted with workers, and then further conducted interviews with 10 brides and 2 shop workers. At this boutique, she reported that they only stocked sample sizes, barring any plus-size women from trying on dresses, and there was a 25% fee levied on sizes over 16. Brides who shopped there also had to sign a contract that released the store from responsibility for altering dresses that no longer fit due to weight gain. However, any alterations due to weight loss were considered routine and therefore were done at no additional cost. In this case, alterations for weight loss were baked into the prices of the dresses, whereas alterations for weight gain were not. Some companies have attempted to do a so-called one-size-fits-all model to be as inclusive as possible. One-size-fits-all eliminates the labor cost of grading and fitting new sizes, streamlines the cutting and sewing processes, and allows companies to speed up their go-to-market process, which is advantageous considering how fast trend cycles go. The faster you can get your micro-trend clothing item out on the shelves, the better. Usually these designs are bland and uninspired, utilizing elastic waistbands and stretchy synthetic fabrics to accommodate more sizes. They are also liars because they're never truly one size fits all, lest we forget Brandy Melville.
Did this fit all right?
Actually, according to former executives at Brandy Melville, the company's CEO, Stefan Marson, admitted that he saw their one-size-fits-most policy as a way to keep the brand exclusive, and even saw criticism of the policy as validation that the strategy was working. And yet, despite Brandy Melville's profitable margins, it's just not true that a plus-size range can't sell well. Vogue Business reports possibly the most potent opportunity in the fashion business today is in clothing more than half of the female population. In the US and Canada alone, roughly 200 million women wear sizes larger than those made by mainstream clothing brands, a number approaching the size of the EU's entire women's market. Coresight Research also estimated that plus-size women's clothing totaled $28.3 billion in 2020, or about 21% of the overall market. And we could talk all day about how Ozempic and Heroin Chic is affecting the fashion industry today, but the bottom line is, while the marketing might be prioritizing skinny bodies the most, that doesn't reflect the experiences or bodies of most North Americans. Designer Juan Carlos Obando, who actually mysteriously is taking a hiatus at the moment, according to his Instagram page, hope he's doing okay, but he crafted beautiful, high-end, sexy dresses for a size range of 0 to 22. And he told Vogue Business that not only was his extended size range his fastest growing segment, he also didn't modify his designs at all for his plus size range. He said, if you're size 22 and you want a slit in your dress, you should have a slit. This kind of attitude is a far cry from the separate plus size lines common in the early 2010s, which, now that I'm thinking about it, bears lots of resemblance to the stoutwear industry of the 1920s. For example, Mango's briefly active plus size line, Violetta by Mango, received a ton of backlash, in part because their clothes were ugly. Tyler McCall wrote for Fashionista in 2014, "What is the point of launching a plus size line if you're just going to offer the same shapeless shift dresses and elastic fucking waistbanded crap as everyone else?" Now, Mango's plus size offerings are the same designs that they make in straight sizes, though they're still fast fashion, so I don't necessarily promote. But I think this goes to show that maybe some of these unsuccessful plus size lines were unsuccessful not because fat women don't shop, but because the clothes were ugly. And also because historically, brands have not promoted their plus size lines either. Marie Denis, CEO of the Curvy Fashionista, told Business of Fashion, "They don't bring us in the store, they don't include us in the marketing, they don't include us in physical events or fashion shows or campaigns, but then they get mad that their plus size line is not performing. Do you really even know we exist?" And sure, I think there's some truth to how not every design made in straight sizes can be fully translatable to a plus size range. But I would also argue that most fashion schools do not teach their students how to design with different body shapes in mind. So many working designers today are not equipped with the knowledge of how to modify a design to still look good on a fat person's body. Speaking to Teen Vogue in 2022, Ayomi Hoken, who graduated from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, said, "To put it plainly, the only way I got plus size experience was from not working with the models my school provided, but instead making my friends model for my collection and then forcing my professors to show me what to do for their body and how certain things needed to be graded out." But at the same time, There is still lots of design innovation going on in the industry today. It's just channeled into different endeavors. I'm going to quote Tyler once again because I think she makes this point very clearly. Maybe it's harder to cut things correctly for plus-size bodies, but I think it's also pretty difficult to replicate those perfectly constructed crop tops from Balenciaga, and that hasn't seemed to stop brands from trying. Ultimately, it really comes down to brand attitudes. It's very clear when a brand is excited about creating more inclusive clothing and willing to put together the resources to do it well, versus when a brand is strong-armed into it because of public opinion and doing the bare minimum to not get canceled. For example, some of the funniest news that's come out in the past few months, in this very bleak time period, is that after finally pledging to invest $45 million in DEI-related initiatives, Victoria's Secret has recently quietly scaled back their DEI goals because DEI is no longer trendy. Can't say I'm very surprised.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
So, long story short, there's a lot of industry issues. However, I think something that people consider less when having these discussions is that there is a lot of stigma in shopping plus size, and sometimes issues of fit are the result of consumers feeling pressure to buy incorrect sizes. For example, at the bridal boutique Evan studied, the bridal shop workers would warn customers that the dresses they carried ran small. But even with this information, there was emotional pushback. One bride who Evans interviewed, Sarah, a 24-year-old white woman, said, even though it is just an arbitrary set of numbers and they literally just ascribe the dresses a number, I still felt like, no, I'm not a size 6, I'm a 2. I wanted to be my real size when I bought my wedding dress. Similarly, in March 2016, Glamour magazine ran a plus-size spread, which they defined as women wearing clothing sizes 12 and up. They featured Amy Schumer, who took to Instagram in protest. Plus size is considered size 16 in America. I go between a size 6 and an 8. Young girls seeing my body type thinking that I'm plus size? Not cool, Glamour. Look, it makes sense why many women feel this way. When we're conditioned throughout our entire lives that a certain body type, thin, is the most ideal and even the norm, it makes sense why we'd be resistant to labels that move us farther away from that norm. Like, even if we inherently know we don't look like Bella Hadid, there is something about the seemingly objective sizing standard that spells it out too explicitly for our comfort level. I mean, even for me, I remember going to Vietnam back in 2018 and being floored, derogatory, that I was a size medium there, which is a size I'd never worn before. And technically a size medium in Vietnam is not the same as a size medium in America, but I felt like the experience really led me to spiral a bit. Like, in the back of my mind, I was like, am I getting bigger? Like, did I grow? Or is everyone smaller than me? And I just kept thinking of myself in comparison to other people in a way that I didn't think before, due to my own thin privilege and also staying relatively the same size throughout my life. As psychotherapist Susie Orbach explains, if we were comfortable in our bodies, inconsistent sizing labels would just be an inconvenience. But since the fashion industry helps breed body insecurity, we can understand this as part of the harm. I don't know if this cape was revolved around me for that entire segment, but oh well, okay. The fashion industry has always catered to thinness, even when the body positivity movement was in full swing in the late 2010s. But because of the social pressure from this movement, many brands were forced to start making some kind of modification to stay in the public's good graces. For example, the Victoria's Secret runway show, which used to pressure even their thinnest models to go on starvation diets before the event, was shut down in 2019 after declining viewership and public backlash to fatphobic and transphobic comments made by an executive. And during the spring-summer 2020 season, 86 plus-size models walked runways across all 4 major cities, 2.8% of all models, which was considered a major improvement at the time. But the pendulum has swung back again, and according to Vogue Business, by spring-summer 2025, plus-size models now only make up 0.8% of all models on the runway. Fashion influencer Natalie Craig also wrote for Cosmopolitan that when she attended New York Fashion Week shows to see the spring 2024 collections, people actually questioned her right to be in these spaces. I feel like the fact that we are encroaching back to this like pro-Anna heroin chic era can of course be linked to the 90s and 2000s revival and more accessible semaglutide injections, but also it comes down to the failure of the body positivity movement itself. Body positivity was originally based on the work of 1960s fat activists, and it was supposed to focus on fighting for the systemic improvements and dignity of all people living in marginalized bodies. But of course, the social media version completely sanitized the movement's original purpose. Tigris Osborne, executive director for the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, talked to BBC about how the most marginalized bodies were still marginalized within the body positivity movement. She explains, many of the most popular body positivity role models only have imperfect bodies when they take off their clothes and draw arrows pointing to their imperfections. Visibly fat influencers, those who are undeniably fat no matter what they're wearing, also have their own followings, but they deal with more harassment, more account bans, and more pushback for glorifying obesity. Body positivity, as it exists in the popular consciousness, mostly just means talking positively about yourself, which I find can easily grow tiring. Like, it's not sustainable. It's like trying to tell yourself that you need to meditate or exercise every day, when most of the barriers to incorporating new habits aren't because we don't want to do the new habit. Trust, we do, but because there are other larger problems that get in the way. For example, I work a lot. And when I have multiple deadlines, I'm too stressed out to carve out time to do self-care rituals. Telling myself I need to hit the gym in spite of whatever obstacle I have going on only makes me feel guilty and worse of a person. Similarly, body positivity doesn't address any of the root causes for why people feel bad about their bodies in the first place. You can tell someone to love yourself for the way you naturally look, but these mantras don't negate the fact that fat people face discrimination in doctors' offices, in the workplace, at the gym, or for the purposes of this video, many don't have access to clothes that they would feel good in. I, fortunately, don't face that kind of discrimination, but even being straight size, and especially working in fashion and entertainment, talking positively doesn't negate the fact that we are surrounded by insane diet cultures that are constantly changing the barometer for what it means to be chic and camera ready. Like, I know people who are skinnier than me who started using Ozempic recently. In saying all this, I'm a much bigger fan of body neutrality, which places less importance on the body as a whole. The idea was first popularized by Anne Poirier in her book, The Body Joyful, and the main idea is about forming our own concept of worth, value, and identity around the internal self instead of the external self. Psychologist Susan Albers explains the body neutral approach leans towards the belief that it doesn't matter if you think your body is beautiful or not. Your value is not tied to your body, nor does your happiness depend on what you look like. Okay, obviously, sizing issues in fashion go beyond limited size ranges. Everyone also has like different proportions too. So even if you're straight size, that doesn't necessarily mean all garments are going to be tailored to you. I myself am 5'2", so basically I have to hem every single thing I buy. My dream is also currently to own a pair of flare jeans, but that feels impossible because if I hem a regular pair of flare jeans, the flare will be gone. Needless to say, the ready-to-wear industry only designs clothes for very specific body sizes and proportions. So how do we combat that as consumers? For me, altering clothes has been my go-to solution. As I said, the most I usually have to do is hem, which can be pretty simple. I learned how to do it through watching YouTube tutorials, though if something is more expensive, I'll usually try to get it done professionally because I'm scared I'll permanently ruin the garment. The more complicated alteration I have to do sometimes is take in fabric at my bust because I have a small bust. So sometimes there's just like too much space in the chest. Still, taking in is always going to be easier than adding more. So I think if you're in between sizes or if say your hips are like much bigger than your waist, I would go for the bigger size, the size that fits the hip measurement and then modify the rest of the garment around that. I know professional alterations can be really costly, especially if you're making a lot of modifications, but there's a handful of simple alterations that you can learn yourself at little to no cost, either through YouTube or through community sewing classes. For example, I think everyone should learn how to hem, how to add buttons, and how to add or change a zipper. I once had a skirt that fit me perfectly at the waist, but was a major struggle hauling up over my ass, which actually makes no sense now that I think about it because this was before my gym rat era. So my ass was like pretty flat. but still didn't fit. So I ended up adding a longer zipper to my skirt so that the opening was bigger, and it worked. If you're in Los Angeles, my friend Isa co-runs a wear and repair workshop where you can learn accessible ways to style it and repair your clothes. They host it out of Circular Library, which offers a number of cool workshops that are all focused on sustainability and upcycling. Sustainable Baddie runs similar events throughout the year in New York City. And Fibershed is a NorCal-based nonprofit that has a ton of sustainability initiatives, and they also run events, including a free monthly mending circle. During the summertime, Michaela runs an on-the-go alterations and upcycling service in New York City called Pedal Ma. You can follow her Instagram to see where her sewing cart is set up, because I think it differs every season. But she's a really kind, community-oriented person who is skilled in production sewing, so her stuff is just like very high quality. A couple years ago, I remember she had a client come ask her to repurpose a bunch of shirts into a stuffed animal, and the finished product was just like amazing. Alter New is also a tailoring service that's been partnering with brands across New York. I met the founder Nancy at the Manhattan Vintage Show years ago. They usually set up a booth there to assist in altering vintage clothes. And I think they're always looking to partner with brands, so if you're a brand owner, hit them up. I happen to know these things because I've been immersed in the industry for a while, but also because I never formally studied sewing, so I'm always looking for help. I sometimes ask my mom if she's visiting. If she's visiting, I'll put her to work. Sorry, Mom. So sometimes I ask my mom or I ask my friends to help me with alterations if they're like above my skill set. Definitely don't be afraid to ask around your community and offer trades like cooking dinner in exchange if, money is an issue. I started altering my clothes regularly a few years ago, and I think that practice combined with shopping vintage where size labels are even more arbitrary if they have them at all, it's all really shaped the way that I feel about size conceptually. By the time I'm done operating on these garments, it doesn't even feel like they correlate to whatever size label they claim to be anymore. And also, having clothes now that actually fit me perfectly has helped me internalize the idea that clothing is supposed to fit you. And if it doesn't, then that's the clothes' fault, and they should be punished accordingly. But I also want to validate that people's bodies change over time, and a lot of people will alternate between different sizes throughout their lives. And this can put extra stress on sizing and how we feel about it. I've definitely had some clothes that I've outgrown because they were like super tight, and I'm like, if I grew 1 inch in any direction, like we can't wear her anymore. And it is a bit devastating because I love those clothes. So I think that upcycling, aka repurposing your clothes, can be a cool way to get more use out of a garment, no matter what stage of life you're at. And it can help you adjust to those stages because you can be like, I don't have to lose this item anymore because of the way that my body looks now. And by the way, this has been a practice since forever. As an example, Anne of the historical clothing blog Poppy's Cottage made a post some years ago detailing an 18th century dress that was repurposed multiple times to fit 19th century and then early 20th century trends. Various techniques like adding extra bones, hooks and eyes, and vertical gathering stitches were used to change the design of the original dress. Two of my favorite dresses I own were custom made for me by Emma Collins. I commissioned her for my green atonement dress, and I also commissioned her to make me a version of the white gown in Pride and Prejudice 2005. My ultimate goal is to have a replica of every dress Keira Knightley has ever worn. We're slowly making our way. But I get that it's costly to get things made to measure. And on an industry level, I also understand that made to measure may not be possible for most businesses. I mean, you can't scale up the same way as with ready-made, plus a lot of consumers don't think it's worth the cost.
I wish I had as much to spend on clothes as she does. Why, I bet she spends twice as much as I do.
It also can take weeks to produce a made-to-measure garment, which, thanks to the expectation set by major corporations that you can get your hands on the clothing you buy online in like 3 to 5 business days, it doesn't work for most people. Since I commissioned my dresses, they weren't just made to measure. The process actually took months But I personally found that waiting for that long, and especially since Emma and I were constantly checking in and going through fittings, it made me love my dresses so much more when I finally got them. And, as I said, to this day, they're my favorite dresses. Again, it is a high cost. I would never pressure someone to only buy made-to-measure clothing, which is not something I do regularly either, by the way. But I want people to be aware that it is possible. And if it's something that makes sense for your finances to save up for, I highly recommend it. I also highly recommend supporting businesses that offer that service, even if you don't use it. Like off the top of my head, Maison Cleo allows you to request custom measurements for every product listed, and I believe the brand Metamorpho offers custom sizing if you reach out via email. If the small business is solo run or if they have a local atelier, then usually custom shouldn't be an issue. And then there's the retailer Selfridges and the brand Gani, which both partner with Sojo, an online alterations business. And Nordstrom actually also offers in-store tailoring services. So I think it's really important to support companies who we think are like paving the way for the industry, because so many of these problems are industry problems. Because they're industry problems, I'm not saying that customers should be forced to find their own solutions when I make these recommendations. I just want to bring awareness to things we can do to make the situation better for us for the time being, or at the very least to give us the language to discuss what's actually happening in this industry. Because sometimes I think that like when people complain about certain things going on in fashion, like it's all just like very general complaints. It makes it harder to design solutions because we don't really know why the solution isn't there, if that makes sense. Okay, anyways, that's all I have for today, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to me yap and spending part of your day with me. If anyone has a recommendation for a place that makes jeans custom to people's measurements, specifically flare jeans, please let me know. Please leave your suggestion in the comment section. I'm sure other petite queens also would want to know that information. But otherwise, I'll see you next time, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.
A suit should be proportioned to fit your figure. The size number is not important, but the cut and the fit are. So look carefully, and you won't have to worry about fashion changes from year to year.